Good afternoon, everyone. Apologies for the delayed start. We had some technical difficulties. It's now past 2 p.m. Eastern, so we'll begin this meeting of the North American Numbering Council. My name is Christy Schumann. I am the designated federal officer of the NANCY, and I thank you all for joining us today for the first meeting of 2023. Chairwoman Charles, I now turn the meeting over to you.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us for the first meeting of the NANCY for 2023. Today, we look forward to hearing from the Numbering Administration Oversight Working Group, which will be presenting a report and recommendation on the feasibility of individual telephone number pooling trials and alternative means for conserving numbering resources. We will also hear updates from the Secure Telephone Identity Governance Authority, the North American Portability Management, LLC, and the Numbering Administration Oversight Working Group. We look forward to these presentations and we appreciate everyone's hard work. Next, we welcome members of the public watching via live stream and encourage you to submit any questions to livequestions@fcc.gov. I'll say that again, livequestions@fcc.gov. Your questions will be read during the public participation portion of the meeting. Before we begin, I will review for council members some ground rules and best practices to ensure we have a smooth and successful meeting. First, please keep your microphone muted unless you were speaking. You may also use the video function, but it is not required. If you have a question or would like to make a comment during a designated discussion times, please use the raise hand feature. Both Christy and I will monitor this. Everyone manages their own raise hand feature, so please unclick once you no longer need it. When you are speaking, please identify yourself as we may not recognize your voice. And please remember to use mute when you are finished speaking. Does anyone have any questions before we proceed? I would like to now, if there are no questions, I would now like to hand the mic over to our speaker this afternoon, Trent Harkenrader. Mr. Harkenrader, the floor is yours.
Good afternoon, Chairwoman Charles, Vice Chairwoman Alexander White, and members of the NANCY, everyone who is watching this meeting online. It's hard to believe it's been a year since I last talked to you all. As a quick refresher as to what I'm doing here, as the chief of the Wireline Competition Bureau here, I manage the FCC staff who work on numbering issues, such as those relating to local number portability, combating illegal robocalling, number exhaust, toll-free numbering, and the new 988 suicide hotline number. I'm really pleased to support the work of the council today and offer my thanks for your incredibly hard work. I see firsthand how vital the NANCY's technical expertise and insights are to the commission. Council members and working groups consistently provide the commission with thoughtful recommendations on complex telecommunications issues that directly impact people's lives. Today, as Chairwoman Charles explained, the council will consider a report from the NAOWG on the feasibility of individual telephone number pooling trials and related issues. And it's been over 20 years since the NANCY last examined individual number pooling. And as we know, exhaust is a concern for numbering resource utilization, particularly as the use of numbers continues to evolve. We look forward to hearing about the report. And thank you in particular to the NAOWG for your hard work and expertise, not only in the continued oversight role, but also with the additional issue-specific charges you are working on simultaneously. I'd particularly like to acknowledge working group co-chairs Phil Lindsay, Karen Rippenkroger, and Laura Holly-Walt, as well as the former co-chair and recent retiree, Bob McCausland, for all of their important leadership. We will also look forward today to hearing updates from the Secure Telephone Identity Governance Authority, the North American Portability Management, LLC, and the Numbering Administration Oversight Working Group, who gets a shout out twice. Such a brief summary of the council's work doesn't really do justice to the time that you all have invested in providing timely and expert recommendations to the commission. Thank you again so much for your dedication and service. And I'll turn the call back over to you now, Chairwoman Charles. Thanks.
Thank you, Trent. Before we begin the roll call, I have several membership announcements. First, we've had a number of members depart from the Nancy for one of the working groups since our last Nancy meeting. We thank them for their service to the council. These members are Rebecca Thompson and Allison Belvins of Twilio, David McCoy, who represented National Association of Attorney General, and Kenneth Culpepper of Cox Communications. We've also had some changes to leadership of the NAOWG. You probably know that Bob McCausland resigned from the NAOWG last August. Bob represented Entrado before his retirement and then continued for a few months as co-chair of the working group as a special government employee. We thank Bob for his service and we wish him the best. Finally, we want to welcome the two new co-chairs who recently joined, Phil Lindsay in leadership of the NAOWG, Karen Rippin-Krausinger of T-Mobile, and Laura Howley Walt of the Public Service Commission of the District of Columbia. Karen and Laura, we appreciate your willingness to serve and welcome you to your new roles within the working groups. And let me just say, I am so sorry if I botched any of the last names that I just pronounced or tried to pronounce. Now I'll turn the meeting back over to DFO Christy Schumann, who will conduct the roll call. If the members have any new ethics disclosures to make to the group, please respond when called with your name to indicate that you were present and then make the relevant disclosure at that time.
Okay, let's start the roll. 10X people. Do we have anyone from 10X people? 800 Response Information Services.
This is Heather Barrows with 800 Response Information Services.
Sorry,
Thank-
Christy, this is John Nakamura from 10X People. I couldn't get off the mute.
Oh, okay, great, thank you. ACA Connects. Do we have anybody from ACA Connects? Ad Hoc Telecommunication Users Committee.
Hi, Susan Gately here for ad hoc and no conflicts.
Great. Alliance for Telecommunications Industry Solutions. Do we have anybody on for ATIS? AT&T.
Olaya Fusi from AT&T.
Bandwidth.
I have Greg Rogers and Lisa Jill Freeman for bandwidth, and we have no conflicts to announce.
Okay. Charter Communications. Do we have anybody on for Charter? Comcast.
Yes, Beth Rose is present and Beth O'Donnell is present.
Okay, thank you. Competitive Carriers Association.
Alexandra Mays from CCA is here.
CTIA.
Hi, Amy Bender for CTIA and no conflicts.
Electronic Privacy Information Center.
Christopher Frischella from Electronic Privacy Information Center, no conflicts.
Google. Do we have anybody from Google? Encompass.
Hi, it's Chris Shipley from Encompass, no disclosures.
Intelliquent. Do we have anybody from Intelliquent? Lumen.
Hello, this is Phil Lindsay with Lumen.
Maine Public Utilities Commission. Do we have anybody from Maine? National Association of Attorneys General.
Yes, this is Tracy Nayer from the North Carolina Department of Justice on behalf of the National Association of Attorneys General, and I have no further disclosures at this time. Thanks.
Thank you. National Association of State Utility Consumer Advocates.
Yes, Bob Nelson from Nasuka, no disclosures.
Nevada Public Utilities Commission.
Hi, this is Tammy Cordova from the Nevada Public Utilities Commission. I have no disclosures.
Thank you. NTCA.
This is Brian Ford with the NTCA. I have no disclosures.
Peerless Network.
Hi, this is Patrick Phipps with Peerless. No conflicts.
Public Service Commission of District of Columbia.
Hi, this is Lara Howley-Walt from DCPSC.
SIP Forum.
Yeah, this is Rich Shockey with the SIP Forum. No disclosures.
T-Mobile.
Hi, this is Rosemary Leist, providing the disclosure that I am not an officer, but I am a member of the NAPAM LLC.
Okay, thank you. TDS Telecommunications.
And Scott Fryermuth with T-Mobile too.
Oh, sorry, Scott.
That's all right, thanks.
TDS Telecommunications.
Hello, this is Paul Najudla with TDS. No disclosures.
Telnex.
David Kasem from Telnex. Good afternoon. No disclosures.
US Telecom.
Josh Berkey from US Telecom. No disclosures.
Verizon.
Dana Crandall, Verizon. No disclosures.
Vonage. Do we have anybody from Vonage?
Yep, sorry, this is Colin Brown from Vonage. No disclosures.
Okay. West Virginia Public Service Commission.
Yes, this is Terry Blake with the West Virginia PSC. No disclosures.
iConnective.
Hi, this is Kathy McMahon with iConnective. No disclosures.
Somos.
Joel Bernstein with Somos. No disclosures.
Did I miss anyone or did anyone join late?
Hi, Christy. Jackie Waldschmidt with Addis.
Okay, thank you. Okay, that concludes the roll call. I turn the meeting back to the chair.
Thanks, Christy. For our first update, we'll hear from Brent Struthers, Director of the Secure Telephone Identify Governance Authority. Brent, the meeting is yours.
Thank you, Chairwoman Charles. It's got a nice ring to it, alliteration. I appreciate that. Vice Chair White and Nancy members, thank you for allowing us to make this update today. If you could go to the next slide, please. All right, so you can see as of the end of January, a little outdated there, we had 835 service providers that have been authorized by the STIPA to sign their calls with the official STIR/SHAKEN certificates. As of today, actually, if you want to update it, it's on 859 providers. So we have seen some growth in the past month or so. Also on the second bullet, it says currently 11 authorized CAs, which was accurate at the time I sent the slide into the FCC, and then the board approved one more CA. So we actually have 12 STI CAs that are assigning certificates now, and one more potential that the STIGA board is still considering. So again, the CAs are the folks that assign the certificates to service providers, and those are the certificate service providers use to sign their calls. So we've got 11 of those, or 12 of those folks now, and one more on the way, probably. If you could go to the next slide, please. Thank you. All right, on this one, we have the board has been looking at we've got using the memorandum of understanding that was signed with the Canadian GA last year. The GA board has been working on a set of trust criteria. These are criteria that the GA board can use to determine if it wants to interconnect its U.S. shaken framework with that of with the framework of another GA, another governance authority. That could be either a jurisdictional GA, like France or the UK or Australia or something like that, or a non-jurisdictional GA, which is not tied to a specific country. These criteria the board's developing will guide it in its decision on whether or not it wants to have an interconnection agreement with that other GA. The criteria may also help it in determining whether or not it wants to nullify an existing agreement if that other GA takes some type of action that perhaps puts the U.S. shaken framework at risk. So both to guide the governance authority here in the U.S. to decide if it wants to interconnect as well as possibly disconnect the frameworks if they've already been interconnected. So that's the work we're doing on international. A new policy is getting really close, certificate policy version 1.4. That's an update of the certificate policy that's now in place. The board is getting ready to consider that within the next probably few weeks. It's general cleanup of our earlier certificate policy. It includes some more language on the certificate revocation list and how folks store their certificate repositories. There are some security updates in that, so we'll get that out. But before we get that out, the board's got to get it approved, and we've got to have some other reviews by our those 12 CAs that I talked about earlier. So we'll get that out, and it should be hopefully in the next month or so. The payments. So folks, those 859 providers that have joined the Shaken framework, they all have to pay their STI/PA fees. So those payments were due, except for anybody that's obviously started the registration after this. Those payments were due at the end of January. If providers have not paid, and we do have some that have not paid yet, the PA has the authority to revoke those SPC tokens that have been granted. Providers that signed on and paid in 2020, that was what we're calling the initial year of STIR Shaken prior to the FCC mandate. Any providers that signed on in 2020 actually should have gotten notice that they got a credit for those fees that they paid back then. That credit would be applied to their 2023 payment. If the 2023 payment was lower than that credit, then those fees or that credit's going to carry over until next year as well. So we've got the funding. Looks like we'll be good for funding this year, but those payments are still coming in. In terms of outreach, we've got a couple things there. We've got the 2022 end of year report. The report was issued. It's been posted on the STIGA websites. As I personally created the initial draft, I can assure you it is a real page turner. Once you pick it up, you won't be able to set it down. So go ahead and read it. If you have problems accessing that, send me a note and I'll send it to you. We've also got the board's getting ready to approve, or has approved at least, hasn't scheduled yet, something we call the External Feedback Forum. Basically, we'll schedule this pretty soon. We're going to send out notices to interested parties to create an agenda for this. But what this is a forum where parties that have an interest in STIR Shaken but do not have membership on the STIGA board can meet directly with the STIGA board to discuss issues that are of interest to them. We're encouraging all of our STIGA board members to participate in this, as we think they might want to hear directly from folks that have an interest in STIR Shaken but are not actually board members. We plan to hold these forums twice annually. We'll see how they work out, and if they work out well, we'll continue with that. If they seem like they're not well attended or folks aren't interested in them, we probably will discontinue them. But at least for now, we've approved this external feedback form so we can get feedback from folks that are not STIGA board members. And you can go to the last slide because that's all I have, and I'm happy to take any questions.
We have a hand up from member Richard Shockey. Richard?
Yeah, hey, Brent, in terms of communication with external entities, would that include foreign service providers as well? I've been personally contacted by certain well-known two-letter agencies, let's put it that way, one way or the other, that are trying to understand the level of progress with Stir Shaken, and it's just those kinds of relationships with. Obviously, the International Bureau will deal with other regulators, but whether or not be foreign service providers that are not necessarily part of the STIGA.
So Rich, are you talking about the external feedback forum?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. We haven't talked about international players, but it's certainly something that we could. So yeah, if you've got folks that you know are interested and would be interested in that, hey, let me know and I'll talk to the board about it. As I said, we're working to really kind of flesh out the structure and who's going to be invited to join the external feedback forum. So if you got some folks you know are interested, let me know.
I will do that privately, offline, one way or the other. But there's one entity in particular that has expressed an interest in communicating.
Great, thank you. I appreciate your help, Rich.
Sure, anytime.
Thanks, Richard. Any other questions or comments for Brent?
Thank you for your time. Very much appreciated.
Thank you, Brent. For our next update, we'll hear from Deborah Tucker, co-chair of the North American Portability Management LLC. Deborah, I'll turn the meeting over to you. The floor
Thank
is
you
yours.
thank you very much, and good afternoon, everyone. Please go to the next slide. We would like to let everyone know some facts about the LNPA accomplishments from 2022. It's kind of a nice way to start off the first NANCI meeting of the year. During 2022, for delivery of NPAC services, there were over 1,400 service providers and PTRS users and 7,000 ancillary service users that had the delivery of the services with high quality, security, and service availability. We activated over 74 million inter-provider ports, up 15% from 2021. Processed over 150 million transactions. That was down from about 26% from 2021. Completed over 787 SPID migrations, up 59% from 2021. And processed 111,465,000 pooled blocks. That was roughly the same as 2021. Additionally, is there a question? Okay, so for our statements of work and contract amendments, South 37 was approved, which provides the following enhancements. It provides a new requirement for the NPAC to return an error if the portable NPA and XX effective date is less than January 1st, 2000. It provides a new requirement to validate that when deleting a service provider in the NPAC, there are no NPA and X-X's associated to that service provider. Next slide, please. And for NPAC release schedule, the release 5.1.1 was successfully implemented on February 5th, 2023, and that included functionality for SOWs 29 and 30, as well as operational improvements and usability enhancements. Under our Contract Implementation Committee, there were 3 new findings reports for providers of telecommunications related services. These are PTRS users that are non-service providers. To validate the need for NPAC data access were received and approved since the last NANCI meeting. And on the next slide, just give you an update on our role. We do provide oversight and management of the local number portability administrator in accordance with the contract orders and or direction from the FCC. I've got contact information there for myself and my co-chair, Teresa Patton with AT&T. And there's some meeting information that's available at our website, www.napamllc.org. Does anyone have any questions? Not seeing any. That's the end of my report. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Deborah. Next, we'll hear an update from Phil Lindsay, co-chair of the Numbering Administration Oversight Working Group. Phil, the floor is yours.
Apologies, got to get myself off of mute here. Thank you, Chairwoman Charles. My name is Phil Lindsay. I am one of the co-chairs of the North American the Numbering Administration Oversight Working Group. I share this role with the new co-chairs, as mentioned earlier, Lara Walt with the Public Service Commission of the District of Columbia, and Karen Rippenkroger of T-Mobile. We also have a couple of FCC liaisons, which are invaluable to our efforts, and that is Bill Anderley and Rebecca Macaroni. And we appreciate all their advice and counsel as we work through the issues that come up within our working group. So appreciate their efforts. If we move to the next slide. All right, our area of responsibility is the number administration, the oversight of the North American Numbering Plan Administrator, the Billing and Collections Agent, and Number Portability Administration, and further, the Reassigned Numbers Database Administrator. Just as a little bit of background, the North American Numbering Plan Administrator that is and the Reassigned Numbers Database Administrator is a single contract that provides both of those functions. The North American Numbering Plan Administrator, the vendor Somos, likewise for the Reassigned Numbers Database Somos. The NAMPA administers the allocation of North American Numbering Plan numbers to service providers. And this includes also the number pooling or 1,000 block pooling and the routing number administration, or RNA, for PANI numbers, which is associated with 911 services. The Reassigned Numbers Database is also administered by Somos and administers the data that is provided into the R&D, the Reassigned Numbers Database, and the service that it provides to callers. And those callers essentially query this database to ensure that they have the most current express consent by the called party to ensure that the callers are not violating any TCPA rules. The Billing and Collections Agent, that is our vendor for that function, is Welch LLP. They collect, they establish the contribution factor that each service provider then contributes into the cost of the contract that I just reviewed, most specifically the North American Numbering Plan Administrator functions. They establish the contribution factor, they bill for the service providers for the amount that has been calculated, and then collect those funds from the appropriate service providers. I think that should be enough for that. And then, for the oversight of the number portability, we basically provide essentially a conduit into the NANCY by the MPIF, or what was formerly known as the Number Portability Working Group. We want to move to the next slide, please. So the NAMPA and RNDA, again, managed by Somos Gov Inc. These are the information associated with the contract that they have with the FCC. It was effective December 1st of 2020, and it's a 5-year base duration plus 3 1-year optional extensions, and expires November 30th of 2025. Similarly, the BNC agent with Welch LLP, their the effective date of their current contract was May 1st of 2018, and it was a 5-year duration, and the current expiration is April 30th of 2023. We can move on to the next slide, please. So during our we have basically a monthly meeting, and the activities include review of reports associated with the NAMPA RNDA BNC agent. These are monthly performance reports and status reports, and then we provide for evaluation of the NAMPA RNDA and the BNC agent. Finally, the LNP MPIF. We have a placeholder for any issues that may come from the MPIF. So with that, we can move to the next slide. Thank you. The NAMPA, our monthly reports include the NAMP, North American Numbering Plan report, the Pooling Administration report, and the RNA report, essentially providing details around how those resources are being consumed. And then we complete our monthly and quarterly evaluations of the NAMPA. The NAMPA contract includes combining number administration system, the NAS, and the pooling administration, the PAS, and the routing number administration, the RNAS. This is a decision that was made and is pursuant to the current contract that anticipates creating efficiencies by combining these systems, and is due to be completed in fourth quarter of 2024. We've also completed the development of the NAMP PA and RNA performance surveys. This provides annual opportunity for user feedbacks, both from service providers and our regulators that use the services of the NAMP or of the NAMPA, I should say, and RNA and PA, obviously. The targeted user types, as again, is the service provider and regulators, and takes into consideration the annual evaluation. And as a status point, the PRA review has been completed and our survey vendor has been chosen. So more to come on that, hopefully in future NANCI meetings. So if we can move on to our next slide, please. So the RNDA, the review of we do a monthly report, as I stated previously. The service providers update the RNDA by the 15th of each month. This next bullet is kind of a statistics around some of the numbers that have been put in this database, right? As of December 2022, we've got 236,958,000 total NAMP numbers, including toll-frees that are been incorporated into this database. Just as a side note, this number tends to increase by about $10 million or 10 million numbers per month. So at least over the last 3 months, that's kind of been the trend. Before that, it's been, somewhere around 8 to 9 million, but recently that trend's been about 10 million. So 1,086 service providers and service provider agents, approximately 20 million numbers are queried from that data into that database on a monthly basis. And then there's about 513 user agents that are authorized to access that database. With that, we completed the RNDA monthly and quarterly evaluation. And then if you need to learn more about the RNDA, you can access those through these websites, the Reassigned Numbers Database website, as well as through the FCC's website. With that, we can move to our next slide. The billing and collection agent, as I indicated earlier, they basically establish the contribution factor, bill and collect those revenues in order to basically enable the contract and the cost of the contracts for the NAMPA. Annual operation review, monthly review of deliverables, the financials for NAMPA and the R&D, and then we also complete that quarterly and monthly evaluation. So with that, we can move to our next slide. Okay, number portability industry forum. The MPIF continues to meet on a monthly basis and focuses on general LNP issues, including XML interface improvements, LSMS capacity planning, and best practices updates and change order review. So if you have any questions or have any interest in membership or participation in that, you can contact either the chairs of the MPIF, Deb Tucker or Teresa Patton, at these email addresses, or if you need to, you can contact me and we can get you set up with them. So with that, we can move to the next slide. Are there any questions? I guess we're to the end of that.
I don't see
Did
any
we-
hands raised. Do you?
Yeah.
Christine?
No, I do not either.
Did we have a slide before that with the membership? Or maybe that's at the end of my slide, but that may very well be. So
Phil, I
with
think it's
that-
at the end of the next presentation.
okay, thank you. Apologies. So with that, I can hand the call back to Chairwoman Charles.
Thank you, Phil. Thank you very much. For our final item today, we will again hear from Phil Lindsay, co-chair of the NAOWG, this time regarding its report and recommendation on the feasibility of individual telephone number pooling trials and alternative means for conserving numbering resources. Phil, I'd like to turn the floor back over to you.
All right, thank you, Chairwoman Charles. Okay, if we can move to the next slide. So back in February of 2022, the NAOWG received a charge letter to address multiple specific examples of wherever possible associated with a trial of individual number pooling. We were asked to provide that report by August 15th of 2022. With that, we were asked to provide any updates to the 2000 answer report that took into consideration alternatives for number pooling. We looked at the feasibility of individual number pooling trials and looked at the time, level of effort, the costs of remedying any technical or operational issues. And then we also looked at to the extent that service providers may have difficulty incorporating the different pooling methods with a individual number pooling trial, and providing potential issues around those difficulties. And then to the extent to which service providers that do not obtain telephone numbering resources in the area which the ITN pooling is conducted, any kind of negative impacts to those providers. We can move to the next slide, please. And then in addition to that, which entities are capable of implementing ITN pooling trial and which may be most suitable, such as those that might administer that individual number pooling trial. And one of those examples could be like the NAMPA or the PA. Then the amount of time it would take to implement, conduct, and determine the success of a trial, and how success would be measured. How the number of ITM pooling trials would being conducted would affect Nancy's findings, and any suggestions that the Nancy may have for alternative means other than ITN pooling, of tailoring numbering resources allocation closer to the actual service provider needs, and enhancing conservation and utilization. So with that effort, it was determined that we needed to some additional time. And so on July 1st of 2022, the FCC issued an extension for us to complete our work. And that report was to be provided on October 7th of 2022. As we worked through the report, it became clear that there was more to this evaluation than just merely identifying the issues around individual number pooling, and that there were other alternatives out there, such as from a pooling perspective, such as 100 block pooling, and thus the FCC provided us with an amended charge letter to then further evaluate the alternatives to pooling, to provide them with a little more detail around not just the pooling alternatives, but also the alternatives to pooling in general that may help facilitate the extension of the life of the NAMP. So we could move on to the next slide, please. So then ultimately the report finds that the significant and technical operational efforts required to enable ITM pooling is just not practical or fiscally responsible, particularly when there is no reasonable expectation that ITM pooling can be easily implemented nationwide, and especially since there are more cost-effective, and clearly more effective alternatives, as we'll touch on here in the short-term conservation strategies. So the report identifies both the short-term and long-term number conservation strategies, number conservation strategies. Apologies. The short-term number conservation strategies that do not require changes to the existing 1,000 block pooling framework, but may require FCC rule changes, include rate center consolidation, education around the NAMP and numbering resource allocation, the enforcement of existing FCC rules, mandatory 1,000 block pooling in all rate centers, and increase thousands block contamination levels. From a long-term perspective, we looked at 100 block pooling as well as the ITN pooling as originally directed. So if we can move to the next slide. Here's the slide I was looking for. I want to extend a thank you to all the folks that contributed to this report, and especially and then as well as on a monthly basis, the efforts that we go through to oversee the vendors associated with the contracts with the FCC. They've been invaluable. I want to extend a special shout out to both Karen Rippenkroger of T-Mobile, as well as Sarah Halko of Telnex. Sarah was our document editor for the ITN report. She did a fabulous job. And Karen Rippenkroger led the ITN report, especially when we were doing double duty, where we were looking at the BNC agent contractual requirements early in the spring of 2022. So without those efforts, I don't think we'd be looking at another extension. So I appreciate everybody's efforts on this, and appreciate all the collaboration of all the members of the working group. So with that, I think the last slide is just our future meetings for the NAOWG monthly meetings, and then our contact information for myself and my co-chairs So if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to any of us. So with that, I'll turn it back to Chairwoman Charles, and she can engage the Nancy membership. Thank you.
Thank you, Phil. Do any members have questions about the report and recommendation?
I don't see any hands raised.
Neither do I. If the discussion is complete, I will now open the meeting for a vote to approve this report and recommendation. Would anyone like to make a motion to approve?
Olaoye Fusi, AT&T, move a motion to approve the recommendation.
T-Mobile.
So this is Rich Shockey. I'll second that.
Okay, so we have AT&T who's moving. Rick Shockey is seconding the motion. Great, thank you. With that second, we'll submit it to the council for a vote. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any nays? The Nancy approves this report and recommendation of the NAOWG. Thank you to the working group members for your work on this issue. And thanks especially to Karen Rippin-Kroger for her leadership of the ITN subgroup. We will now move on to the public participation. As I noted earlier, we enable public participation through comments filed in the docket and through a dedicated email address, livequestions@fcc.gov. First, we'll turn to the comments filed in the docket. A public notice for this meeting released on September 27th, 2022, asked members of the public to file any comments in the Commission's electronic comment filing system in CC docket number 92-237. Do we have any comments from the public?
No, we don't have any comments in the docket.
Thank you, Christy. Are there any public comments or questions received through the livequestions.gov email address?
No, we do not have any questions from the live questions mailbox.
Thank you for that, Christy. And lastly, do any Nancy members have other business they wish to address? Hearing none. Christy, anything from the commission you'd like to add?
Yes, thank you. We have several announcements today, but before I get into those, we had a number of people who joined once the meeting was already in progress. Did we have any members who joined the call after the roll call?
Yes, this is Glad Klepper with Charter Communications.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, thank you very much. So for announcements, first, at the beginning of the year, we released a public notice announcing that we have a new docket for Nancy related matters. The new docket number is WC 23-1. Going forward, we will be using this docket for the Nancy instead of the old one. I also wanted to give members and the public information about rechartering of the Nancy. Members will remember that the Nancy charters last for 2 years and our current charter expires in September. We've begun the rechartering process. We will soon be releasing a public notice to announce our plans to recharter and seeking nominations for the full council. Current members who want to continue on the new council after September will need to reapply. We will be sure that members get the public notice with information about nominations. At this time, we will be seeking nominations for the full council only, but once we are well underway with vetting and approval for council members, we'll put out a separate public notice to seek nominations for the working group. So we'll let you know about that as well. If you have any questions during the rechartering process, please feel free to reach out to Rhonda or me, and we can help get you any answers that you need. Finally, our next meeting is not yet scheduled, but we expect it to be in June for the annual contract review presented by the NAOWG. soon we'll start coordinating a date for that meeting and we'll let you know. We wanted to let members know that today's meeting will be our last all virtual meeting. Starting in June, we will be moving to a hybrid model for our meetings. We will still have a virtual option for members who cannot be in DC, but staff members who want to attend in person will be at the FCC headquarters building. For June, we hope members will be able to join us to celebrate return to normal operations of the council, and we'll have specifics for you as the plans come together for that. As always, if you have any questions about any of these things, or for that matter, anything else related to the Nancy, always please feel free to reach out to the Nancy team and we'll try to help you any way that we can. That's it for today. Thank you, Chairwoman Charles.
Thank you, Christy. Vice Chairwoman Alexander White, anything you'd like to conclude with this afternoon?
Thank you all for a wonderful meeting as usual, and thanks for checking in on my end. I appreciate it all.
Absolutely, and thank you, Bridget. If there is nothing else, I thank you all for your time. We look forward to seeing you in June. Do I have a motion to adjourn the meeting?
This Bridget, motion to adjourn.
Do I have a second?
Comcast seconds.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Meeting adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.